All right, regular agenda items. So just checking in on the PG11 rollout. Looks like Jose was commenting just before the meeting started. We're on track. Had some extra development. Testing, staging. So quick summary, Jose.
Yes, so hello everyone. So Craig, we have to develop to stop the whole platform and to stop the traffic in enabling. Like we had to develop this last week. Ahmad was supporting us from SRE. And we are just doing the last checks between the MRs to apply the new configuration of Postgres or the new version of the binary. And we should be good to test tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks. Any questions on the Postgres 11 rollout? All right. So a couple items came up last week while we were working through sharding and looking at Citus. So I just wanted to validate assumptions. So everybody that's in this working group's on the same page, sorry. So we're working on sharding implementation for .com only. This is not something, at least in the initial iteration, that we would ship to self-managed. We can provide documentation, but it's not going to be a standard part of self-managed, at least in the first iteration. Maybe it's something we can evaluate long-term. But does anybody have a different assumption?
No, that works. I think that's quite reasonable. As I mentioned last week, in my opinion, is that way. I'm still also, but this is a different story. I don't want to complicate things, but Postgres actually distributed as part of the product, right? So it's not like a dependency. You see, you need a Postgres, and then if GitLab would be distributed as a product like that, like Postgres a dependency, like Jira does, just to give an example, then you could do anything you want absolutely transparently. So I guess there's some discussion because of that, but I guess that's not related to this group, just as an FYI.
Was Postgres shipped as part of our installation? Just throwing
yes, that comes with Omnibus.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And we've dropped support for MySQL, so it's basically we only support Postgres at this point in time. Okay, and then I just wanted to do a quick clarification on Citus. There were some concerns that, you know, if Citus ultimately doesn't work out, have we wasted a lot of time and effort on it? And the answer is, yeah. I mean, if Citus ultimately doesn't work out, then some time is lost, but ultimately we're still following the path that we laid out first, where we're investigating partitioning, we're investigating sharding. Citus is an extension on top of PostgreSQL that will help accelerate if we can actually use it. So if Citus is not an option for us going forward, we can still do everything that we need to as we set out for goals for sharding to make sure that, you know, we don't hit a wall on PostgreSQL eventually as we continue to build and continue to grow the database. And we can actually start scaling horizontally with all of the tools that are built into PostgreSQL. Citus was just viewed as an acceleration on that development timeline. That being said, there are a couple of things that we are concerned about with Citus. First is the enterprise license. I see Christopher typing about comparing to our overall spend. So right now, the enterprise license, it looks like it would be about 1.05 million per year. I don't know how this compares to our overall spend. To answer Christopher's question down there, does anybody else know what our overall spend is for infrastructure for supporting .com?
That's a lot. I can get you the cost. Give me a second. I'm not sure what the cost of the database itself is.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a second. I'll find it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a gauge for, like, you know, say our spend is $65 million. $1 million is a lot of money. But if our spend is $5 million, then $1 million is a lot more money.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
I did the math. Oh, what was it? I thought it was like 20K a month for the current. Maybe it was 20 or 30K a month for the current database deployment.
I think Christopher's asking for like total .com spend, right?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Yeah, but that's not super relevant.
Overall
mean,
spend's not super relevant.
Yeah, this is definitely like this is isolated to what we spend on database. The question is what would this be? Yeah, like would this actually save us on the overall database cost? So if we spend some money on Citus to make it scale more horizontally, we can reduce the vertical size of the individual database nodes. So what is this as a percent of total database spend? Because this is within scope of just database service and has nothing to do with the rest of like it doesn't change what we spend on monitoring. It doesn't change what we spend on API. It changes what we spend on database.
Yeah, I think I see both points, right? It does, and we're still doing some research on what the overall return on investment if we went forward with Citus, because yeah, I think you're right, Ben. It's about 30K a month on the infrastructure just for the database. And Citus did tell us that they have seen that you can reduce by 2 to 3x. If you implement Citus, you can reduce the number of cores that you're using. You know, so if we cut it in half, it's not going to be 1.5 million per year. It'll still be, I can't remember, Pat did a quick calculation, still 700 or 800 per year, just on database costs, additional costs. But I also see Christopher's point, you know, if this is a 1% increase on overall hosting of the site, then it might be worth it at that point in time. But if this is a 20% increase on just the database portion of the overall .com host, that might be harder to justify. So there's still some research to do.
Why is Citus per node for all of our nodes? It's only for our database nodes, which we only have 10 of.
Per core, sorry.
Oh, per virtual. So we actually have way more than that. We have about 1,200 cores.
Yeah, and I asked for a number.
Like I pointed out in other conversations, we're overscaled by at least 2x comfortably. So we only actually utilize about 250 cores at most. Like we're probably only in the 200 core range for what we'd actually need for licensing. So 200 times 12 times 1368 is 3 million.
Our total spend on .com per month is 1.2 million.
So this would double our spend.
Per month. So yeah, so total it's around, you know,
we do $1 million per month. Okay. So
by the way, we need to take into account that Citus or any sharding architecture for that matter is going to require more cores than we have right now, because each shard needs to have its own high availability. So at least there's going to be 2 instances per shard, and I would not recommend actually less than 3. So I would recommend 3 instances per shard, plus the coordinators, which are separate, and we need to make them highly available. So we're going to need 2 or 3 coordinators too. So the total, whatever the optimal number of cores it is, and I agree that it could be probably very reduced, we're going to need to increase it when we go to sharding. So we're going to have a division and then a multiplication. I don't know what the number is going to look like, but there's no.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I don't think that's going to actually change the number of cores that are actually utilized.
Yeah.
So we'll probably utilize a few more cores, but it's not going to be a doubling. It'll probably be, adding Citus. I'm going to rough guess it'll be like a 10 or 20% overhead. But like I said, we are way underutilizing the current cores allocated, and by switching to a sharded architecture, we'll should be able to reduce that even more, because the individual shards won't have to spend as much core time to answer the same query, because they're working on a smaller data set. So it's one of those things where the bigger your data set, the more exponential your core time goes. And I've seen this quite obviously as the load goes from, say, 10,000 requests per second to 11,000, the CPU time could double. And so I'm not quite worried about this so much, because Postgres doesn't do as good a locking, and so that's kind of shifted. That kind of core cost is shifted to the PG bouncer.
So I'm gonna interrupt. So yes, there's a lot more detailed work. I literally just threw together a doc down here on follow-up items so we can further break down and consider the conversation. Excuse me. All of these are valid points, and there's a lot more work to do to break down the cost. The pricing literally came in on Thursday. The number, the 760 cores number, came from Jose. So we have 12 servers, 96 cores apiece. We're actually not going to be using 4 of them, so that's where that number came from. And there's the additional wording on the Citus website where it says they can consider a site license. Now that's from when they were Citus and not necessarily a subsidiary of Microsoft, so that might not be an option. It's not something that came up during the conversation, but I will ask the representatives that I talked to, is like, hey, is there a site license? Because the pricing that we're looking at right now is untenable, if I'm being kind. I don't know that we can justify $1 million a year, year over year on the spend. I don't know that the return on investment's there. So clearly still some more investigation to be done there.
Yeah, we're trying to get our spend down and increasing it by 10%, which is a little bit high of an estimate, but roughly 12 million, 1/12 of that, 10%. You know, that's a pretty daunting. So my request is you know, in the next week, if we can get some events details of kind of expectations around this and come up with here's the model of what we currently spend, here's the model of what we would expect to spend based on some analysis. And it seems like it should be pretty straightforward, kind of not quite back of the napkin, but back of the Google Doc kind of calculation. Because like you said, Craig, $1 million just isn't, I don't know if I can realistically put a proposal forward that says we're going to increase spend by $1 million.
I wouldn't, and I just don't think, I mean, from what we've seen so far of the features that they offer and what we've been able to test with, I just don't think the value's there at that price.
Okay.
I think ultimately it would just cost us a lot more in the long run. So we'll continue to break this down, and I will have the follow-up email conversation with Microsoft, and we will try and cut it as much to the bone as we can, getting it down to a realistic number, you know, with over provisioning, with anything else we can consider. And yeah, to Alvaro's point, you know, even if we can get it down to only the number of cores that we need to run this properly, there's still going to be a slight uptick with the number of coordinators. And then if we have to go HA on coordinators, there's going to be, you know, some number that we're going to have to increase on the number of servers that we have for all of this. And yeah, so we'll get some more detail and we'll have more feedback by next week on what we think the closer price is going to be. And even then, I don't know that it's going to be realistic unless Microsoft comes back and says, we'll give you a site license for a flat fee of X year over year. So lots to follow up on there. Let's see, kind of jumped around a bit. So Citus, and again, like I said, if Citus turns out to be a no-go for us, there's some good information on features that we would like to have on sharding that, you know, Citus Enterprise offers some nice tenant rebalancing and a couple other features. If we can't have those, if we can't use Enterprise, it's something we would have to build ourselves, and it's just the timeline and invested team on that one. The other concern is with the community license, and jumping down here. So community might still be something we can use. Citus is an extension, and if we use it as is, we're probably okay with the AGPL license because we're not actually linking into any of the code. It's just something that we're installing and running on PostgreSQL. That being said, we still need to make sure that legal is okay with it. the concern that I have is that if we use community license and then we build on top of that to get the other features that we want, do we then need to open it up where legal would be concerned? Because right now AGPL is on the list of licenses that we don't like or support, and it's in the handbook. So again, more research to be done there on licensing. So others, I'm going straight down, talked about that. So, and then what else has been done? So Pat measured the results on implementing cascading deletes without foreign keys. It seems like the differences were pretty minimal and it's acceptable. There's some implementation details that we're talking about on the best path forward on that one. So, that's it. If I'm going straight down the agenda, next steps, talked about the more detailed breakdown on Citus costs and trade-offs. And then Mac, you want to verbalize your question for next follow-ups?
Sure, yeah, it sounds like we're on track. And the earlier the dates are in for next steps, the better. Just a heads up that this affects Nelia, our team member. Russia has extended the no work holiday to May. Nelia has graciously been contributing all this time, but we also need to comply by the local laws and regulations. So the earlier the dates, the better, so we can plan around it. That's an ongoing development in that part of the region.
So what's the no work holiday? Oh, look at that.
It's just a paid holiday here to the end of the April.
End of April. Just went out on.
It should not affect my work, so I hopefully will be able to look out for PG11 update.
Okay.
Craig, circle back to what's happening next. So you're going to investigate or review more about AGPL license. Do we have a timeline about when we can draw a conclusion whether it's a go or it's no go?
I will try to get an answer by the end of this milestone. So is that a week and a half?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other topics anybody wants to cover today? Oh, you know what, blockers. So Pat has the Citus cluster set up. He's been chatting with Nelia about their ability to build a big test set. The concern that he has right now is it's limited in the number of projects. I think it's only one project, right, with a bunch of data in it. Doesn't really, it's probably not the best test set. So we're looking into alternatives to get something that's more representative of production data. And we just talked about that like 20 minutes ago. So I don't have a good follow-up for that one, but we will follow up this week to see if we can. I know there was a script that exists out there to anonymize production data. So maybe there's a way we can revive that one and have a representative test set from a production-like environment. So we're looking into alternatives there and what we can use for our Citus cluster testing to have a bigger test set and something that's more representative of production so that we can see what the performance improvements are. Right. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Craig, if you need help on the legal stuff, let me know. I'm happy to help you there.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. All right. Happy Monday.